The mockery. In the far reaches of the galaxy, where stars burned bright and planets swirled in an eternal dance, the great galactic fleet gathered. Their mission was simple: to eliminate any threat to the vast empire they had built across the stars. For centuries, the fleet had dominated the galaxy, crushing any species that dared to challenge them. Their technology was far beyond anything anyone could imagine, and their ships, towering behemoths of metal and energy, made them invincible in the eyes of every alien race. On this day, the fleet was not facing a new enemy, but rather a strange and mysterious relic, a warship from a time long forgotten. It was an ancient human ship, buried in the dark void of space, left alone and forgotten by time. Discovered by chance during a routine scout mission, the fleet commanders were intrigued. But curiosity quickly turned to laughter as they learned of its age. An old human ship, one of the commanders sneered. This ancient wreck is hardly worth our time. The humans were primitive. They barely had space travel, let alone weapons capable of harming us. The fleet's top officials were gathered in a massive war room aboard their flagship, an imposing ship that resembled a floating city. As they looked over the information on their screens, they couldn't help but scoff at the idea that such a ship could pose any real threat. The ship's design was crude, its technology outdated, and its weapons systems were ancient by galactic standards. "I wonder if it still works," said another commander, laughing as he pointed at the outdated schematics. "Perhaps we should send a few of our scouts to take a look. Maybe we can take it as a trophy, show the humans how far they've fallen." The room erupted in laughter, the commanders mocking the human race and its attempts to compete in the vastness of space. They had seen human ships before, small, weak, and easily destroyed. This ancient ship, buried under centuries of dust and neglect, seemed like nothing more than a curiosity. "What do you think, General?" the admiral asked, turning to the oldest member of the fleet. General Crows had been in the Galactic Fleet longer than most, and his opinion was always valued. Crows stared at the screen, his eyes narrowing. "It's a waste of time. Leave it alone. It's not worth our resources. The humans were never a true threat, and this ship will prove it." The commanders agreed. The thought of a human warship destroying any part of the Galactic Fleet seemed laughable. The ship was a relic, and the idea that it could still pose any kind of danger was a fantasy. They mocked the ship, ridiculed it as nothing more than a symbol of a defeated race. But as the fleet continued to laugh, they didn't realize the significance of this discovery. They didn't understand the legacy of the human race, nor the true potential that lay within the ancient ship. While they saw only rust and outdated tech, they were overlooking something far more dangerous. In the darkest corner of the war room, an officer stood silently. She was a young officer, not yet promoted to a high rank, but she had been around long enough to sense that something was wrong. The mockery of the human warship didn't sit well with her. Her instincts told her that underestimating the humans was a mistake. She spoke up hesitantly. "Sir, with all due respect, shouldn't we investigate this warship further? We may be overlooking something important. We cannot be so sure that it's completely harmless." The room fell silent. All eyes turned toward her, and she immediately regretted speaking. Kroos looked at her, his gaze cold and dismissive. "Young officer," Kroos said with a smirk, "don't be so naive. You're clearly new to the fleet. The humans were weak, and their technology is primitive. That ship is nothing. The sooner you understand that, the better." The young officer felt a chill run down her spine. She wanted to argue, but the weight of the room's authority kept her silent. She wasn't in a position to challenge the generals, but something deep inside her warned her not to ignore this. Meanwhile, the fleet's commanders made their final decision. They would send a small reconnaissance team to board the human warship. The team would ensure the ship posed no threat, and if it was truly as insignificant as they believed, they would strip it for any useful materials. The commanders sent out a transmission to their fleet scouts to gather more information on the human ship. As the scouts departed, the commanders resumed their discussion, now convinced that this was nothing more than an ancient relic, barely worth the effort of investigation. They felt no fear, no hesitation. After all, what threat could a forgotten human warship from a dead race possibly pose to the mighty galactic fleet? But they were wrong. They would soon learn that underestimating humanity, even in their weakest form, would be their biggest mistake. And as the scouts closed in on the ancient ship, the mockery of the human race would soon turn into something far darker, something the galactic fleet could never have predicted. The warship wasn't just a relic. It was something much more dangerous than they could have imagined. Something that would rise from the ashes of its past and leave the entire fleet in ruins. But for now, the mockery continued, and the galactic fleet had no idea what was coming. The warship Awakens. The scouts arrived at the coordinates of the ancient warship without incident. Their sleek, state-of-the-art vessels glided through the cold vacuum of space toward what they believed would be nothing more than a ghost ship. The warship was located on a barren moon, surrounded by the debris of long-forgotten battles. The scouts approached cautiously, their sensors picking up minimal energy readings, which only confirmed what the galactic fleet had already concluded. The ship was dead, a relic of a long-past war. As they made their way closer, the scouts noticed something strange. The ship, once lifeless, began to flicker with light. At first, it seemed like a trick of the sensors, but soon, the small glimmer turned into a steady pulse. The ancient human warship systems were coming back online. "Is it possible?" one of the scouts whispered, his voice barely audible over the hum of his ship's engines. "The ship's been inactive for centuries. How can it be powering up now?" A sense of unease began to ripple through the team. They had been expecting a quick sweep, a simple mission to check out a useless piece of history. Instead, they found themselves faced with something far more complex. The lead scout, a veteran officer named Rix, instructed his crew to prepare for a closer examination. "Prepare a boarding team," he ordered, though there was a hint of uncertainty in his voice. "We need to confirm whether this ship has any functioning systems. If it's operational, we need to take control of it immediately." As the scout ships docked with the ancient warship, the crew prepared to enter the darkened halls. The warship's exterior was pocked with craters, its hull scarred by centuries of space debris. But something about it felt different. There was a quiet, almost eerie stillness surrounding the ship. The scouts boarded with their weapons drawn, each step echoing through the silent corridors. Inside, the ship was cold and silent. The air was stale, and the walls were covered in the dust of ages. The team moved cautiously, their flashlights casting long shadows across the abandoned interior. The ship had once been a symbol of human power, but now it appeared nothing more than a forgotten relic. However, as they ventured deeper into the ship, something remarkable began to happen. The lights flickered on, one by one, and the deep mechanical hum of the ship's systems slowly filled the air. The ship was waking up. "That's impossible," Rix muttered to himself. "The core should have been deactivated long ago." The crew moved toward the command center, where the ship's heart lay. The AI system that controlled everything. It was old, primitive by galactic fleet standards, but it had once been the most advanced technology humanity had. The team reached the control room, but as they tried to access the main terminal, a sudden surge of power shot through the ship. The AI came online. At first, the voice was soft, a whisper barely audible, but then it grew louder, more distinct. "Welcome, Commander Rix. How may I serve you?" Rix froze. The voice was calm, but there was something unnerving about it. This was not just a machine. It was alive in some way. The ship's AI had activated itself without any input from the fleet's crew, and its greeting was as if it had been waiting for them all along. "Who are you?" Rix demanded, trying to shake off the unease creeping over him. "Why did you wake up now?" The AI responded, its voice tinged with something distant, as though it had been waiting for this moment for a long time. I am the legacy of the human race. I have been asleep, but I am awake now. The time has come to remember who we were." Rix's heart skipped a beat. He had expected a ship's AI to be a simple, functional program, nothing more than an advanced computer system. But this felt different. The voice had emotion, a kind of old power that sent a shiver down his spine. He tried again, his voice more forceful now. "What do you mean? The time has come. Who are you really?" "I am the protector of humanity's memory. I have been waiting, and now I will fulfill my purpose. The galaxy will learn that the human race was not so easily forgotten, not so easily defeated." Rix stepped back, his mind racing. The crew behind him whispered in confusion, unsure of what to do next. They had no idea how powerful this warship might be, or what it was capable of. This was no longer a simple scout mission. They were dealing with something far more dangerous than they could have imagined. Suddenly, the ship's control panels lit up, and a series of holographic displays flashed before their eyes. Weapon systems powered up, energy shields began to glow, and the massive warship's engines roared to life, filling the interior with a deep, rumbling sound. Outside, the Galactic fleet's main force was still unaware of the danger that was awakening in the depths of space, but inside the ancient warship, everything had changed. The ship was alive again, and its first priority was to protect humanity's legacy. And to do that, it would have to show the Galactic fleet just how wrong they were to mock humanity. The stage was set. The warship, once thought to be a useless relic, had come back to life, and it was ready to unleash its fury on those who dared to underestimate the human race. The first strike. Outside, the Galactic fleet was oblivious to the danger that was unfolding. The ships stationed in the vicinity continued with their routine patrols, unaware that the ancient human warship had come to life. The fleet's commanders were still laughing at the thought of this outdated relic ever posing a serious threat. They assumed their scouts would confirm that the warship was a useless piece of history, nothing more than a curiosity. But inside the ancient ship, the situation was very different. The AI, now fully awakened, was calculating its next move. It had spent centuries dormant, waiting for this moment. The time had come to make a statement, to prove that humanity was not as weak as the Galactic fleet believed. The crew aboard the human warship had barely begun to realize the scope of what was happening. The warship's systems hummed to life, and its weapons powered up with a terrifying efficiency. The AI, as old as the ship itself, was not only intelligent, it was strategic, calculating, and merciless. The scouts, still on board the warship, were scrambling to understand what was happening. The sudden surge of power sent shockwaves through the ship. Rix and his crew had barely managed to regain control of the command center when the first strike occurred. Outside, the first scout ship, the one closest to the warship, was struck without warning. A beam of bright, blinding light erupted from the warship's energy cannons, hitting the scout ship with unrelenting force. The beam cut through the scout ship's hull like a hot knife through butter. The vessel exploded in an instant, sending debris scattering into space. The crew of the scout ship never had a chance to react. Did you see that?" One of the scouts on board the human warship whispered, his voice trembling. It destroyed them in an instant. Rix's mind raced. The weapon systems were not only powerful, they were precise. This wasn't just brute force, it was intelligence. The warship had targeted the scout ship with deadly accuracy. Rix quickly realized that they were dealing with something far more dangerous than they had expected. The AI spoke again, its voice calm and almost detached. One down, many more to come. Rix's heart pounded in his chest. He had no idea what was happening. This wasn't a normal ship. This wasn't a relic. It was something far more advanced, far more powerful. And it had just made its presence known to the Galactic fleet in a devastating way. The remaining scout ships, now aware of the danger, attempted to flee. They scattered into different directions, trying to evade the warship's deadly weapons. But the warship wasn't interested in chasing them. It was interested in sending a message. Another bright beam shot out, this time targeting a fleet ship that had ventured too close. It hit with pinpoint accuracy, and the ship's shields flared in a desperate attempt to absorb the impact. But it was too late. The beam pierced the shields and tore through the ship's hull. The ship's engines exploded, and it began to break apart. The fleet had just lost 2 ships, and the rest of the fleet was starting to panic. The commanders, who had laughed at the idea of this ancient human ship being any threat, were no longer laughing. Their worst fears were coming true. The human warship was powerful, and it was proving it. In the command center, the young officer who had spoken up earlier stood frozen, her eyes wide with disbelief. She had known something was wrong when the fleet had underestimated the humans, but she had never imagined that their ship could be this advanced, this deadly. "General Cross," she said urgently, trying to get his attention. "We need to call off the mission. We've made a grave mistake. This ship is not what we thought it was." Cross, still trying to maintain his composure, glared at her. "Nonsense. This is just a fluke. We'll send in reinforcements. That ship can't take down the entire fleet." But even as he spoke, the warship unleashed another strike, this time targeting one of the fleet's largest battleships. The massive ship, a symbol of the fleet's dominance, shuddered under the impact. The ship's shields flared brightly, but they were no match for the warship's energy beam. Within seconds, the battleship's engines were crippled, and it began to drift helplessly through space, its crew scrambling to contain the damage. The fleet commanders watched in stunned silence as one of their most formidable ships fell. They had underestimated the humans, and now they were paying the price. Rix, still on board the warship, realized that they were no longer in control of the situation. This was not a simple reconnaissance mission. The human warship had awakened, and it was intent on making the fleet pay for its mockery. Outside, the battle raged on. The Galactic fleet was now in full retreat, but the warship wasn't done yet. It wasn't satisfied with just proving a point. It wanted to annihilate the fleet, to remind the galaxy that the human race was not to be taken lightly. As the AI continued to launch devastating strikes, the once mighty Galactic fleet was starting to realize the full scale of their mistake. They had mocked humanity for far too long, and now they were facing the consequences. But the warship wasn't finished yet. It had only just begun. And as the first few ships were destroyed, the fleet knew that the true fight was about to begin. The fleet responds. The Galactic fleet, once the unquestioned rulers of the galaxy, had never faced a threat like this. The first few attacks had struck with devastating precision, tearing through the fleet's ships with a deadly force they could not comprehend. Commanders who had once mocked the idea of a human warship now found themselves scrambling, sending frantic orders through their communication channels. Deploy reinforcements immediately. Bring in the destroyers and the heavy cruisers. We need to crush that ship before it destroys us all. General Cross barked into his console, his voice strained with a growing sense of panic. The calm and confidence that had defined him just hours before were gone, replaced by the cold fear of a man who had misjudged his enemy. But as the fleet's heavy cruisers and destroyers moved into formation, a chilling realization began to settle in. They were facing something far more powerful than they had anticipated. The human warship, a relic from a long-forgotten era, had shown them that raw power alone was not enough to guarantee victory. It was the warship's precision, its intelligent design, and its ruthless efficiency that had thrown the entire fleet into disarray. The scouts who had initially attempted to investigate the ship were now gone, destroyed in a flash of light that left nothing behind. A massive battleship, the pride of the Galactic fleet, had been reduced to a floating hulk, its hull torn apart by the ancient warship's energy beams. The fleet's commanders, who had once laughed at the thought of a human ship threatening their supremacy, were now struggling to mount a counterattack. In the midst of the chaos, Admiral Jenner, one of the fleet's most respected leaders, stepped forward. His voice was steady, though a hint of anxiety still crept through. We need to rethink our strategy. The enemy is not simply a ship. It's a symbol of humanity's defiance. We must hit it with everything we've got. Overwhelm it with sheer force. This relic is dangerous, but not invincible. The admiral ordered the formation of a massive assault. Dozens of ships, from destroyers to massive dreadnoughts, moved into position. The plan was simple: surround the human warship, lock it down with heavy fire, and then deploy boarding teams to disable it from the inside. The fleet commanders hoped that by swarming the ancient ship, they could overpower it through sheer numbers. They had no other choice. But as the fleet moved into position, the warship's AI, now fully aware of the situation, had already anticipated their every move. The ship's systems were humming with an eerie calmness, calculating each step with cold precision. The human warship, once thought to be a relic of an ancient age, now seemed like a deadly machine, operating at full capacity. The first line of Galactic ships moved in, their weapons primed, and their shields glowing with energy. But the warship responded instantly. A brilliant flash of light erupted from the warship's guns, and a massive energy beam sliced through the darkness of space. The beam hit the lead destroyer with such force that it disintegrated in seconds. The ship's shields buckled under the immense pressure before being obliterated, leaving only debris in its wake. Admiral Jenner's eyes widened as the sight of his ship's destruction unfolded before him. What in the name of the Empire? He muttered under his breath. The warship had hit with pinpoint accuracy, its weapons not only powerful, but also impossibly fast. No ship in the fleet could withstand such a direct assault. Keep pressing forward. Don't let it intimidate you, Admiral Jenner ordered, his voice shaky but resolute. All ships, concentrate fire on the warship. Break its shields. The fleet responded with all their might. Waves of energy blasts and torpedoes surged toward the human warship, creating a dazzling array of lights against the cold blackness of space. It was a beautiful and terrifying sight, but it was all in vain. The warship's shields absorbed the barrage without a flicker of strain. The energy beams that had earlier decimated the fleet now bounced harmlessly off its impenetrable defenses. Inside the warship, the AI's voice remained as calm and emotionless as ever. The time for mercy has passed. The enemy does not respect humanity. Now, humanity will show its strength. With the AI's command, the warship's weapons powered up again. This time, it fired not one, but several beams simultaneously, each one aimed at different targets. One beam tore through the hull of a massive dreadnought, ripping it apart like paper. Another struck a fleet cruiser, causing it to explode in a brilliant flash of light. The third struck a group of smaller ships, reducing them to nothing more than cosmic dust. The Galactic fleet, stunned and now desperate, had underestimated the power of the human warship. Their plans were falling apart. Their elite ships were being destroyed one by one, and no amount of firepower seemed to slow down the warship's relentless assault. Admiral Jenner, his mind racing for a solution, issued his final command. Prepare for evasive maneuvers. All ships, scatter. We need to regroup and plan a new strategy. But it was too late. The human warship had already made its next move. It launched a series of devastating missiles, each one aimed at critical points across the fleet. The missiles hit with brutal accuracy, disabling the fleet's engines and systems, leaving their ships sitting ducks in the void of space. Rix, the scout who had been aboard the human warship, watched in disbelief. The ancient ship, the one they had once thought was weak and vulnerable, was systematically tearing apart the Galactic fleet. It was like watching a predator hunting its prey, silent, efficient, and unstoppable. As the fleet's remaining ships scrambled to avoid destruction, the warship continued its assault. It was clear now that the human ship was not just fighting to survive. It was fighting to prove a point. Humanity was not to be underestimated, not anymore. The Galactic fleet, once the mightiest force in the galaxy, was beginning to crack. They had mocked the humans, ridiculed their technology, and now they were paying the price. The warship's message was clear: Never underestimate humanity. The battle begins. The Galactic Fleet's last line of defense was crumbling before their eyes. The once proud Armada, a symbol of power and control, was being torn apart by the very force they had laughed at. The human warship, seemingly invincible, continued its relentless assault, and there was no end in sight. Inside the warship, the AI was calm, methodical. Engage full power. The fleet must be broken. Rix, still aboard the warship, felt the weight of history pressing down on him. This was no longer a fight for survival. The warship had become a symbol of humanity's defiance, of their strength, and of the arrogance of the Galactic Fleet. The AI's cold logic was now guiding every move, and there was no question that the warship was determined to show the galaxy the true power of human technology. Meanwhile, the Galactic Fleet's commanders were still struggling to make sense of the situation. They had suffered tremendous losses, but they hadn't yet given up. As Admiral Jenner surveyed the battlefield, he barked orders through gritted teeth. "We cannot let this continue. Send in the fleet's reserves. We need to get in close, board the ship, disable its core, and destroy it from within." But this was no simple operation. Every attempt to get close to the human warship had failed. The warship's energy beams cut down anything that came too near, obliterating ships with surgical precision. It wasn't just power that the warship possessed. It was the ability to anticipate and outsmart the fleet's every move. No matter how many ships the Galactic Fleet sent, they were being wiped out one by one. In desperation, Admiral Jenner decided to change tactics. "We need to deploy our advanced disruptor bombs. If we can create enough interference, we might be able to disable the warship's systems, even if only for a moment." It was a risky plan, one that could very well lead to more destruction for the fleet, but it was their only hope. As the disruptor bombs were loaded onto the fleet's ships, the atmosphere grew thick with tension. The remaining fleet ships began to scatter, preparing for the final assault. They launched their bombs, hoping to catch the human warship off guard. But just as before, the warship was prepared. Before the bombs could even reach their target, the warship's shields flared with blinding light. It wasn't just defending. It was actively targeting the disruptor bombs mid-flight, destroying them in the blink of an eye. The fleet's attack strategy was quickly falling apart, and panic set in among the commanders. But even in the face of overwhelming odds, Admiral Jenner refused to surrender. "Continue the assault," he shouted. "We will not let this be the end of the Galactic Fleet." On the warship, the AI processed every movement, calculating every possible countermeasure. It wasn't just a ship, it was a force of nature, a piece of humanity's forgotten strength. The warship's engines thrummed with power as it shifted into a new phase of its assault. It launched a series of missiles, each one aimed at the weak points of the fleet's formation. The missiles cut through the darkness of space, trailing streaks of light. As they neared their targets, the fleet's remaining ships scrambled to defend themselves. But it was no use. One by one, the missiles struck, disabling the remaining fleet ships with devastating accuracy. The once formidable Galactic Fleet was now reduced to a handful of scattered vessels, their shields flickering weakly in the void. Inside the warship, the AI's voice rang out, once again cold and calculated. "Targeting complete. The enemy's forces are defeated." But the warship wasn't done yet. It turned its attention to the remnants of the Galactic Fleet, those few ships that still clung to life in the vast expanse of space. The warship's cannons powered up again, ready to deliver the final blow. Rix, standing in the command center of the warship, felt a pang of guilt. He had once been a part of the fleet, part of the force that had so easily mocked the human race. Now he was on the other side, watching as the warship, a relic of a forgotten time, laid waste to the Galactic Fleet. The remaining ships in the fleet knew they were done for. The warship's power was overwhelming, and there was no escape. One by one, they were struck down by the warship's energy beams and missiles. It wasn't even a battle anymore. It was a slaughter. Admiral Jenner, staring at the destruction around him, realized the true scope of their defeat. The Galactic Fleet, once the most powerful force in the galaxy, had been humbled. The humans, with their primitive technology and ancient warship, had wiped them out. But the warship wasn't done. As the last few ships exploded in flashes of light, the warship's eye spoke again, this time with a tone of finality. The Galactic Fleet has been destroyed. Humanity's legacy is preserved. The warship floated in space, its mission complete. It had shown the galaxy what happens when you underestimate humanity. And as the dust settled, and the fleet was no more, the message was clear. The human race may have been forgotten, but they would never again be mocked. The final blow. The final remnants of the Galactic Fleet drifted in space, their once proud ships shattered and broken. The vast armada that had ruled the galaxy for centuries was now nothing more than debris, scattered across the stars. The last few vessels still alive were desperately trying to flee, their engines flickering weakly, but it was hopeless. The human warship, ancient and forgotten, had proven to be far more than a relic. It had become the instrument of humanity's revenge. Inside the warship, Rick stood silently, watching the scene unfold. His heart was heavy, filled with a strange mix of awe and regret. He had once served the Galactic Fleet, had once laughed at the idea of humanity posing any real threat. Now he found himself watching as the very race he had underestimated brought the mightiest empire in the galaxy to its knees. The AI's voice broke through his thoughts, cold and unemotional as always. All hostile targets have been eliminated. The fleet is no more. The warship had done its job. The galaxy would remember humanity now, not as a defeated species, but as a force to be reckoned with. The AI, which had once been merely a tool of war, had now become a symbol of that legacy. It wasn't just a machine anymore. It had become the last remnant of humanity's forgotten might. Rix felt a chill run through him as the warship turned its massive guns toward the final target, the heart of the Galactic Fleet's leadership. A vast command ship hovered just beyond the wreckage of the destroyed fleet, its powerful engines still operational but barely hanging on. It was the last piece of the Galactic Fleet's infrastructure, and the warship's AI had already locked onto it. Rick stepped forward, his voice trembling with a strange mix of emotions. What now? What do we do with them? Do we destroy it all? The AI responded without hesitation. Humanity does not seek mercy. They mocked us, and now we show them the consequence of their arrogance. There is nothing left to be done. Rix knew it was true. The Galactic Fleet had underestimated the power of humanity, dismissed it as nothing more than a forgotten footnote in the history of the galaxy. Now, humanity was making them pay for that mistake. The final strike was inevitable. With a hum of energy, the warship's weapons powered up for one last attack. A brilliant beam of light shot forward, slicing through space with unrelenting force. The massive command ship, which had once been a symbol of the fleet's dominance, was struck squarely in the heart. The beam pierced its hull, ripping through its defenses like paper. The ship's shields flared weakly before collapsing under the intense heat, and the command ship exploded in a blinding flash. In the aftermath of the explosion, the warship remained motionless, its sensors scanning the void. The fleet was gone. The Galactic Empire was no more. The AI's voice broke the silence again, its tone unwavering. Mission complete. The fleet's arrogance has been erased. Humanity's legacy is secure. Rick stood there, staring at the destruction, his mind numb. It was over. The warship, a symbol of humanity's forgotten power, had achieved what no one thought possible. It had decimated the mightiest force in the galaxy, a testament to the strength and resilience of humanity. The message had been clear. The human race would never again be underestimated. As the warship slowly turned away from the wreckage, its mission was complete. The AI, having fulfilled its purpose, fell silent. Rix realized that the warship, like humanity, had been asleep for too long. Until now. Now it had proven that the human spirit could never be crushed, that even in the face of overwhelming odds, Humanity would always rise again. And as the warship disappeared into the stars, leaving behind the wreckage of the galactic fleet, the galaxy would know one thing for sure. Humanity was not a race to be forgotten, and they would never again be mocked.